In October 2015, kawaii metal group Lady Baby came to New York and performed one of the only shows they would ever do with their original lineup. It coincided with that year's Comic-Con, so the crowd was what you'd expect. A sea of Ash Ketchums wearing homemade #Gamergate pins standing around wondering why women don't like them. It's because they're awful. And also me. The doors opened 20 minutes late, and the show began much later than that. By the time things actually started, folks were getting pretty antsy, but everyone livened up as soon as Australian frontman / Lolita model Ladybeard came out and introduced himself. The crowd went wild, and remained so for the duration of the 15-minute set, because at the time, the group only had 4 songs. Encore, we shouted over and over and over again after they walked off stage, and eventually Ladybeard came back out and was like, "We don't have anything else, guys, but I guess we can just do Nippon Manju again." And they did. Honestly, I loved this. I loved the jank, but it really highlighted what a strange slapdash project Lady Baby was. And though it has actually grown pretty legit after a few lineup shuffles and name changes, its conception was almost silly in its simplicity. Pitched to Ladybeard as Babymetal, but you're in it. And sure, why not? You could have much worse inspiration than that. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me a guy who spent far too much of his youth obsessed with Japanese culture, and today I'm talking about Babymetal. Honestly, Babymetal and the entire kawaii metal genre it pioneered feels like a weird, elaborate joke. The idea of taking quote-unquote idols who in 2010, when the group was formed, were just 11 and 13, and putting their poppy style of singing and dancing in front of a heavy metal band is one of those things you hear about and just say, "Oh, Japan, please stop fetishizing children." But age aside, it seemed like something designed for people with my particular musical interests. I mean, the last 2 band reviews on this channel are for K-pop group Blackpink and post-hardcore band Dance Gavin Dance, and I love them both. I've often described my taste as metal covers of top 40 songs and also the top 40 songs being covered, and so a group like Babymetal that mixes those things, assuming it's done properly, is totally up my alley. I mean, just listen to this bit from their breakout hit, Gimme Chocolate, which is far less interesting than a lot of their other music, but still serves as a decent primer. It's a fascinating combination of styles that just grabs you and doesn't let go. Whether you like it or not, you sure as heck don't forget it. And as of last weekend's Terminal 5 performance, I have now seen Babymetal live thrice, which is to say, every time the opportunity presented itself. I never went out of my way to see them like the Virginian couple I met at 2016's show did. They had made the 7-ish hour drive that day for just the concert. In the previous year, they had flown to Chicago to see a performance there. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been dedicated to anything as much as they are to Babymetal. But I always got my tickets for New York shows the day they became available. The first time they played here was in 2014, shortly after the release of their self-titled debut album. In another move that seems to have inspired Lady Baby, they came out an hour and a half late. And unfortunately for me, my cellular telephone died 40 minutes into that, so I was forced to stand awkward, alone, and deviceless in the Hammerstein Ballroom. I just stared out at the crowd, which was much more varied than those at the subsequent shows have been, and the stage, which had been built up with this beautiful and elaborate set, one that they haven't repeated since, much to my chagrin. Earlier Babymetal had this epic Fox God saga thing where a big voiced-over projection would start the show by telling the audience some aspect of a grand fictional backstory, but by that first world tour, they'd already moved beyond parts 1 and 2. We were thrust right into a fairly theatrical part 3. A few more had passed by the time they played again. I guess if I had wanted the full story, I should have gone to teach English in Asia like I had planned. Oh well. In any case, that conceit appears to have largely been dropped. It was hinted at towards the end during a literal ad for the new album and also the tour that we were currently at, which was weird. But there was nothing new to the narrative. The introductory projection was just an introduction. Some guy telling us that Babymetal is a thing, and then asking us several times if we were ready to headbang, which, yeah, of course, but also it seems like they should have come out and started with Headbanger then, instead of putting that song near the end. I mean, Megitsune is a better song, and they've been opening shows with it for years, but still. Actually, the first song I heard at the venue was Gimme Chocolate, though it was when I was still in line outside. At first, I thought it might have been like at the Blackpink show where they were playing their own music outside, but it turned out to just be the halal stand out front. The operator had set up a pair of speakers next to the grill and was blasting them out. It didn't make me or anyone else I saw buy anything, but it was appreciated nonetheless. This was Babymetal's first time playing in New York with an opener, Avatar from Gothenburg, Sweden, where one of my favorite sub-genres, melodic death metal, got its start. I'd never heard of the band before I saw them on the lineup and didn't actually listen to them ahead of time, but for damn sure I have listened to them since. They were awesome. Vocalist and unexpected trombonist Johannes Eckerstrom has a really fun energy and one hell of a range, nailing screams and cleans alike. They had a circusy vibe that I enjoyed. It reminded me vaguely of like MCR or Motionless in White, whose newest album is great, by the way. Though sadly no one came out and threw candy in the audience. One thing I really appreciated about their act was the lighting. Concert lighting is usually so unmotivated, especially at heavy shows, just colors spinning around without any meaning. Avatar, on the other hand, used their lighting to focus attention on individual band members and accentuate the specific mood. You don't see that nearly enough. And after a rockin' 45 minutes and a brief interlude between, that introduction I mentioned began, the Kami band came out, and then it was time for the trio themselves. And I won't lie, it was a little strange to see some random girl in the full costume walk out with Suzuka Nakamoto, aka Su-Metal, and Moa Kikuchi, aka Moa Metal. I knew it was coming, having read about last year's departure of Yui Mizuno, or Yui Metal, but it was still jarring. Instead of finding a full-on replacement for their third, the group has instead put together a rotating cast of dancers, apparently called the Avengers, to accompany them on stage during the tour. I think this is genuinely fascinating. Obviously, a traditional band that lost a member would pretty quickly replace them and get on with it. And indeed, the Kami band that supports the girls on stage has seen its lineup change over time. But I can see how that would be more complicated here. Like, I don't know what I would think if Blackpink suddenly lost and then replaced Rosé, or Jennie really went solo, low. Still, it's not like other similar groups haven't done that, including Lady Baby, so I am curious what the future holds there. One thing that's pretty clear is how the change has impacted their music. Although the long-awaited third album, Metal Galaxy, is still a few weeks away, they've released enough songs to show that Su-Metal's taking over pretty much all the singing, and Moa Metal has been relegated to traditional backup vocals and dancing. This has resulted in a more mature sound, and I'm not going to complain about that, particularly since every new song so far has been quite good. And so is the unreleased track they played at the show, Shanti Shanti Shanti, which is the sort of bizarre genre mashing that you really want from any Babymetal release. What with its heavy Indian influences, it feels like the kind of thing that would make a great intro for a Japan Bollywood anime co-production. The contrast of their styles is accentuated during live performances because you're watching the girls in their admittedly metal costumes singing and dancing in front of the band that is rocking so hard behind them. It is a true sight to behold, and it has been really cool seeing them develop over the years. It's not just that the sets are different or even that the cast has changed per se, although it really was odd seeing a different person who wasn't even mic'd mouthing along to the track while the others sang. This particular Avenger was game as hell and looked extremely happy to be there, like smiling all the time. But she was young, like unsettlingly so. The remaining members are in their early 20s now, so it really stood out that this new girl probably wasn't much older than Babymetal was in 2010. They have genuinely honed their craft over the years to make something that feels much more cohesive. When I first saw them in 2014, I was struck by the awkwardness of the production. They would do a couple songs all together, then Su-metal would do a solo, and then Babymetal and Moa-metal would do something dancier together. But between each, there would be these long, energy-killing pauses. 2016's show had the same structure, but it was much tighter. Now is totally different. With the exception of the first half of The One, they were all on stage together all of the time. And since Babymetal's departure, I imagine that a number of songs that featured the duo more prominently will never be played again. And maybe that's for the best. It's unlikely, for example, that Iine will ever return to rotation. They'll probably never release another song as genuinely bizarre as that one, actually, which features the two funniest transitions I have ever heard in a song to and from what could reasonably be argued is the worst rap verse in a metal song, and oh boy, is there a lot of competition for that title. I mean, listen to this shift. Ouch. But also like wow, right? And then when they leave it, it's so good. It's so good. I love it. But you can tell that even they're embarrassed by it, and that they have been for years, because the Live at Budokan release from 2015 straight up doesn't have the verse. Instead, they just shout at the crowd and wait for the music to change back. I love it. And they have become much more confident since then, despite the undoubtedly huge setback that was the loss of 1/3 of their group. And it is genuinely impressive that they've been around long enough to grow as they have. Idol-based groups typically have pretty short shelf lives, so the fact that Babymetal is coming up on a decade and still killing it is huge, even if they haven't made it totally unscathed. But I never doubted their ability to succeed. Ever since I first heard Megutsune more than 5 years ago, I knew that they had tapped into something special and had a bright future ahead of them. And it has long been clear that this thing, kawaii metal, that seemed like one big joke, was always serious. But not too serious. 9.0 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamry and Marco, Kat Saracata, and Benjamin Schiff. If you liked this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.